what periods of time over 40 years are employees saving in when they're provided the same resources, the same variables. And so like employee A will be saved, $500 per month from age 20 to 30, completely stop contributing to their retirement from age 30 to 65. And then employee B is where most people fall into, and really saving for retirement isn't really a priority until they kind of hit around age 30 or so. Maybe they're married and they have a lot of those other things out of their system, and where employee A will contribute $60,000 in 10 years and then wait 40 years, and then employee B will contribute $210,000 from age 30 to 65. And then I asked the crowd, who's going to have more money at age 65? And it's, the entire intention of the exercise that employee A contributed, half as much money or less than half as much money and has more money at retirement because their assets were invested in the market longer.
Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello. Welcome to the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. Very happy to be here in the studio at ubngo.com in Burbank, California. And extremely happy to have a repeat guest. I love when somebody wants to come back on the show. I think it's a lesson with today's guest in just asking for what you want, because we finished show number 97 on managing market volatility and some other things. It was a great show with Kurt Altrichter, and he said, hey, if you ever want me to come back and talk about 401ks, that's another area of expertise. And so he was a great guest the first time around, very entertaining talking about money. So I kind of love that in a guest. So we have him back today, and I'm super happy because I think 401ks are an important thing for us to talk about. And there's way more to it than you know. I don't think we're very well educated on that. So we are going to demystify 401ks for you as a business owner, if you offer 401ks, or for people participating in 401ks. There's a lot to learn. So I'm going to start by telling you a little about Kurt. He is our distinguished guest today, Kurt Altrichter, President and Chief Investment Officer of Ivory Hill, a leading fee-only fiduciary financial advisory firm dedicated to crafting holistic retirement plans and providing private wealth management services to forward-thinking organizations and individuals. At Ivory Hill, they're all about creating opportunities for their clients to leave their own legacy. Kurt's journey in the realm of pensions and 401k plans spans an impressive 12 years, making him a true expert in the field. He specializes in pension and 401k plans, managing a diverse range of retirement solutions, including 401ks, 403bs, pension plans, cash balance plans, and profit-sharing plans. But Kurt is more than just numbers and portfolios. He's on a profound mission to make a meaningful impact on the lives of individuals and organizations alike. His passion lies in empowering people to save sufficiently for a dignified retirement, making financial security a reality for all. In addition to his unwavering passion, Kurt holds the Chartered Retirement Plans Specialist designation from the College of Financial Planning, a testament to his expertise and dedication. Innovation is the hallmark of Kurt's career. He spearheaded the pioneering initiative of the first multiple employer aggregator plan for the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild, uniting nearly 200 breweries to secure their employees' financial futures. And there's more to this bio, but I think I would prefer to just bring Kurt in. He is really knowledgeable, as you can tell by what I just read to you. He is extremely knowledgeable and experienced. So, Kurt, welcome.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you so much for being here again. I'm really excited to have you here. So we're going to talk today about a different topic. I really do recommend that people go back and listen to episode 97. It was really informative. There was a lot there. It was one of those episodes you actually want to listen to a couple of times and take some notes. But we didn't really touch on 401ks. And so I'm super excited about that. We talked before the show just about how little people really know. I mean, they know that it's a good idea to, sign up for your company's 401k plan and get the match or whatever it is. But I'm not sure that people in general pay very much attention to it after that. So can you dive in and just start sharing about your experience with people and their 401ks?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's, one of those things, it's a good to have type of, I mean, even business owners to a certain point when I'm setting these up, hey, I've been in business for a while, I should probably have a 401k, and it's kind of just to have it. And so employees you pretty much only focus on the matching portion of it, which that is important, but they don't typically know that this is a vehicle that provides you more of a benefit than an IRA or a taxable brokerage account will ever be able to, especially from a tax standpoint. And really, no matter how young or old or how much money you make, it is typically a free vehicle for you to start building wealth. The majority of Americans the majority of their wealth is in, their homes, but then secondary is also their 401k. So it's and what I hear from older employees all the time is, man, I wish I would have saved more early on. And so it is something that I think, the younger generation now is starting to get a little bit more focused on than maybe, their kind of predecessors. But so that's a positive sign to see, but it's probably like the most unsexy employee benefit that's out there.
Yeah.
For money, it's an expense out of your budget. That's how some people look at it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is interesting. When my son about 18 months ago got his first, real job and they were offering a 401k, I was like all over him to check it out. And it was, he was on his own learning day trading and all of these things. I think it probably fell on deaf ears to worry about the 401k. I remember when I put the minimum into my 401k when I was working, and I just remember that feeling of retirement is so far away. Like, I've got other things to think about right now. How do you convince people that they should start this now? Because as you and I know, time makes a huge difference.
I like to kind of talk about, the old adage of, just compounding and the cost of waiting for, once you actually do get to retirement, and, time in the market, or time money, or the amount of time that your money is actually invested matters more than you contribute. And I show a kind of a corny slide during my participant education meetings that, I'm pretty sure everyone has seen this, employee A, B, and C all make the same amount of money from age 20 to 65. And then I just kind of break down in which, at what periods of time over 40 years are employees saving when they're provided the same resources, the same variables. And so like employee A will be saved, $500 per month from age 20 to 30, completely stop contributing to their retirement from age 30 to 65. And then employee B is where most people fall into, and really saving for retirement isn't really a priority until they kind of hit around age 30 or so. Maybe they're married and they have a lot of those other things out of their system, and where employee A will contribute $60,000 in 10 years and then wait 40 years, and then employee B will contribute $210,000 from age 30 to 65. And then I asked the crowd, who's going to have more money at age 65? And it's, the entire intention of the exercise that employee A contributed, half as much money or less than half as much money, and has more money at retirement because their assets were invested in the market longer than the person who waited 10 years. So, I mean, that typically will open up a lot of people's eyes. And oh, by the way, you don't need to, have $1 million in your retirement account to retire. A lot of people don't. Most people don't, actually. And so kind of, if you're trying to live the same lifestyle that you are on, $40,000-$50,000 a year, you don't need $1 million sitting in your retirement account. Because you're going to have some Social Security and some other things that are going to supplement that. But, or if it's more of a person who's maybe entrepreneurship focused, I kind of like to tell a story about how I started my own company, where I was saving in my own 401k, and I actually took that balance and went to a bank and leveraged it without having to liquidate it, just leveraged it, pledged it to a bank, and then they turn around and wrote me a check, and that was my startup business cost. So it's an asset, a living, breathing asset, just like a business or a stock is to you. And, it's better to start earlier than later, always. And if you haven't started yet, start now. It's kind of the old adage. And if you can't make it work, start with 1%. I guarantee you're not going to miss 1% of your paycheck going into your retirement plan. Just get started is the key.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's super interesting about that bank loan. So that was essentially the collateral for your business loan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the cool thing about that is legally, your 401k is protected by bankruptcy. So if you think about the way that pledging these defined contribution assets to a bank actually makes no sense from the bank standpoint, because they can't take it even if you were to default on that loan. But but what banks know is that most people will have drained their retirement savings accounts prior, so then to avoid bankruptcy, which I highly don't recommend, but I get it in certain situations that life does happen.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, you're right about that. Life does happen. And I had a period of about, at least 10 years where we had a company, 401k in my husband's company, and we were contributing to that. And then he did a big transition that I've talked about many times. And the cash flow was, we were starting a new business. We had no cash flow. And the first thing I did was stop contributing to the 401k. And that was supposed to be temporary. Lasted about 10 years. All those things that we say are temporary. I'm going to live in this house for 2 years, and then all of a sudden, 20 years later. So that was a huge lesson. That was a huge mistake is what it was. I mean, I really have paid the price for that. And it was, a poor decision, B, just a neglected decision. So, there's two things that happen. We have to, that was not something that should have been cut. There was something else that could have been cut instead of that, but it was kind of easy to cut that out. So do you see that often?
I do see that often. For people that are starting businesses, I personally have a little bit of a soft spot for that, because, that's one of the biggest ways you can do to build wealth is by starting your own business where you own the whole thing. You're taking 100% of that revenue, and in hopes of, you got to kind of gamble on yourself a little bit, where, it probably doesn't make sense to contribute to retirement savings, but, you got to know when to pull the plug on that, and hope and have a good business plan to know, hey, this is where we're going to be at. I'm going to segment this part of my assets eventually into my retirement account. But, I don't know a single business owner who bet on themselves that's now successful today that regrets it. So if that's the plan, then that's kind of one of those life circumstances that you can do, where you might have to shut off savings for a while. You might have to live off of ramen noodles and not go out with your friends and do stuff and put everything on the line for the hopes of making it, getting a step ahead, because very few people want to live uncomfortable for about 6 months to a year to have a life that most people don't have. So, I do think that, cutting down savings, maybe just trimming the savings. I don't like turning it completely off. I know when I started my business, I trimmed way down on my savings personally, but that's because I needed that cash flow, to pay the rent and the mortgage and all that. So it does happen. Where I think a lot of people do get caught up is like, hey, I have $200,000 in student loans. Why would I save any money when I have that much money, there, and that is where I think either a financial advisor or someone if you have a good idea with an Excel spreadsheet, you can kind of figure out that it usually does make sense to save well, even though you are paying off debt. But in that situation, I'd probably overweight paying off debt than savings, because your debt's going to be a guaranteed return of cash flow back into your pocket, which then you can in turn invest. And so kind of the Dave Ramsey style type investing, if you clear out your debt and that clears up $2,000 in cash flow, well, now you can move that $2,000 into your 401k or whatever retirement savings vehicle you're doing, when before you could maybe only do $100. Now you can massively build wealth pretty quickly if you can stick to a plan that way.
Right.
But the problem is, like you kind of said, most people don't come back to it.
Yeah, sadly. I mean, that's that's the importance of having regular dates with your money, so you remember these things. But let's talk about, there's a variety, obviously, of ways to save for retirement. Where do you sort of rank the 401k, and what would some of your advice be to people, given that there are multiple places for money to go to save for retirement?
So I guess kind of that new, I guess I'll focus on that person who is maybe brand new, just got employed, maybe it's their first job or first time they ever had a 401k, is number one, focus on kind of what you can control when it comes to financial planning. So, and what I mean by that is you can't control the market ever. You, me, Warren Buffett, Gordon Gekko can't control the market, and you can't control, policy decisions by our lawmakers that affect, taxes, saving rates, and employee benefits a lot. So don't focus on that at all, or, hey, this is what the Fed's doing, this is what Secure Act 2.0 came out from Congress. That type of stuff you don't even think about it. What you can kind of control is your employment and your earnings. If you're, if you work in sales, you can make more money. If you work in a job that's pretty well set, you're going to get your 3% raise and $10,000 bonus every year, then you can't really control your growth that way. And then you can kind of control how much, the longevity of it. But what you have 100% control over is your asset allocation and your investing, and how much you save and spend. And so I would focus more on those two aspects than anything else for the current moment. But I would actually put, even though I am a 401k pension advisor, I would actually encourage you kind of go run through the basic steps of financial planning first. Is, have your emergency savings. And I'm not one who has a rule of thumb of 3 to 6 months or a year. I think that's unrealistic for a lot of people. I think that your emergency savings should be more based on your job security. For example, if you're like a doctor or something like that, your job security is very, very high. It's probably unnecessary for you to have 3 to 6 months stashed away. Maybe 2 would be enough for a cash cushion. But then after you kind of have your emergency savings and your debt payments are being paid at a minimum, is I would actually encourage you to first focus on your health savings account, your HSA. Why? Why would a 401k advisor tell you to contribute to that first? Well, because in retirement, your 2 biggest expenses are going to be taxes and healthcare costs. And healthcare costs, once you hit 75 years old, typically you're going to start spending like 16 to 20% more on healthcare costs at that point in time. So that's where that HSA now, when you're younger and healthier, if you can max that out, on the individual level it's $38.50, on the family level it's $77.50 a year, and you do get some deductibility, and it's tax deductible on the way in, and then it grows tax deferred, and then when you pull it out, it's also tax deductible. So it's triple tax savings for that. So, but I want to be crystal clear on this. Don't fund it and then use the money out of the HSA. What I'm telling you to do is to fund it, and if you can invest that money just like it's a 401k and never touch it. That's the best way to kind of do that. And then kind of next is that's when we start talking about that 401k. Is after you've kind of maxed out that as well. Now, if your company provides a match, don't miss out on free money. That's already baked into your compensation plan. If they are providing a dollar for dollar match up to a certain amount, you need to at a minimum be taking advantage of that up to the maximum matching dollar amount. And then once you have made that, I would recommend your next goal would be to max out your 401k, which would be, for this year, would be $22,500 if you can manage that. I wouldn't worry about anything else besides just your 401k and then once you max that out, then we can kind of get into IRAs, backdoor Roth IRAs, and taxable brokerage and other types of savings vehicles. But most people don't need those things to start off. Did I kind of answer your question there?
That was a great answer, in part because it's so funny. I usually I do a lot of things right, but on this show, for some reason, I just bring up everything I'm doing wrong, so I sound like an idiot. But you brought up the HSA, And that has been on my list for several years, actually, because I have private insurance with a very high deductible. And so I've been meaning to do that. So I'm thrilled that you brought that up, because I do think that gets also left behind pretty easily. So that's happening in the next week. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you saying that should come before anything, I think is super important for people to hear, because I have put that behind a lot of things. It's one of those, get to it as soon as I can. So.
Yeah, and then you and I, who are independent contractors, that's kind of a hard thing to, I guess, get. If you're like me, I'm on state health insurance. In order for me to have an HSA, I have to pay a little bit more money every month just to have that. Am I going to do that? Is kind of a decision that needs to be made prior to that. And a lot of the times, at least here in Minnesota, the health insurance you're required to get through the state is so expensive and so bad that you really don't want to you don't really want to give them more money than you actually have to at that time. But if your company provides it for you, take advantage of it.
Yeah. I was interested in what you said, though, about putting it in there and leaving it. So what part of you still get the tax deduction in doing that? I was actually under the impression that, whatever you spent out of the account was what you were allowed to deduct. So clearly I'm wrong.
So the HSA is kind of like the 401k, I believe, was officially invented or cornerstone in the 1980s. And I look at the HSA kind of like the very elementary stages of what the 401k was. And so they're already talking about, in Congress, actually doubling the contribution limits. And so I think eventually you're going to be able to contribute 20, 30 grand into your HSA every year, just like you can your 401k.
Wow.
Which there'll probably be more focus in the marketplace on my side and on an employer's side to make that more beneficial and to focus on that a little bit more. Especially the ability to be able to invest that HSA money is a huge advantage.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk about 401ks and taxes, because that's that's a huge topic as well. Why don't you just kind of inform us as to some of the tax benefits and some of the tax ramifications?
Yeah, so tax benefits of 401k, so different than an IRA. A lot of people kind of think that you can, go online as a W-2 employee and open up your own 401k. That's not true. You can't. There's no an EIN or a business owner needs to sponsor that plan, so you have to either be an employer yourself or be employed by an employer to contribute to a 401k. And so the contribution limits and how they operate are actually very different. So in an IRA, you can contribute $6,500 a year. To traditional or Roth, and then you get your catch up as well to that, where in the 401k world you can contribute up to $22,500 to your plan as an employee, and then your employer can actually stack on more than that. And I can get into how you can actually contribute even more to your 401k than just the annual maximum as well in a minute or two.
Okay.
But the tax ramifications of that is, if for easy math, so let's just say you're maxing out or you contribute $20,000 to a pre-tax 401k. That means you're going to be taxed in the future when you withdraw that money from your account. And the way the IRS looks at it, let's just say for easy math, you contribute $20,000 and your annual compensation is $100,000. Well, instead of getting taxed on $100,000, you're going to get taxed on $80,000, and that's how the taxes work. So it can have a pretty big impact, especially if you're on the edge of a tax bracket, where it'll literally lower your taxable income on how you do it. Now, if you go Roth 401k, you're not going to get those tax benefits, today, but you will when you retire. To give you an idea of that, you may have saw the news story about Peter Thiel. He's a big, kind of VC investor in Silicon Valley, and he got into like PayPal and Twitter stock at less than 1 cent a share, and he bought it inside of his self-directed Roth IRA. And I believe today Peter Thiel has around $5 billion in his Roth IRA, and in 3 years, when he turns 59 and a half, he can pull $5 billion with a B out of his Roth IRA 100% tax-free, and the government's really mad about it.
That is super interesting. That's a great example. So do you get to choose this when you are signing up for your 401k plan?
Yeah, so when if you're kind of going through the enrollment side of your 401k plan, that'll be one of the things. Do you want to contribute to your Roth, or do you want to contribute to your pre-tax? Probably one of the biggest questions that I get, and I really wish I had a blanket answer that works for everybody, but it really does depend on that person and their household income. So if they're married, and one spouse makes a lot more than the other, then it might not make sense to go Roth, because if you're making, I can tell you, if you're making upwards of $300,000 or so a year, taxes are an issue for you today, and you are going to want to go more pre-tax to lower that taxable income, so you don't have a huge tax bill at the end. Mm-hmm. However, if you're 20 years old, 21, 22 years old, you're in your early working years, and taxes aren't really an issue for you, I would say 9 times out of 10 it's going to make more sense for you to go Roth. But here's the kicker, though. It's not one or the other. When it comes to your retirement plan, you can contribute to both. And in some ways you have to contribute to both, because your employer matching dollars, up until Secure Act 2.0 that was passed this year, they had to go to pre-tax no matter what. You couldn't reallocate that to Roth. And so that 3% matching dollars that you might get are going to go into your pre-tax, where you can then contribute your other 10-15% to Roth if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. And to make it really complicated for you, they just passed a law, even though no one can implement it yet because none of the record keepers can, is now they're allowing the option for you to choose your employer matching dollars go to Roth. Now, they haven't figured out the tax code on that yet, so I don't believe anybody can currently do that yet, but that's on the forefront of Congress to allow that eventually. So
okay,
you currently can do it today, but how it's taxed and how it affects the employers is kind of what we're waiting on.
Okay. And, how things are taxed is one of the most important aspects of, which way to go with these investments. And honestly, that's not something I think the general population wants to or can keep up with, the way people who are making their, life in the financial industry. That's part of the value, I think, of having financial advisors, is to know things like what you just said. I don't know what's being discussed right now, but you do. And then, how to, even when you don't really know what to do with it. So, it's really important, I think, for people to have somebody guiding them, within these instruments, the 401k or whatever it is. So let's talk about how the assets are managed. And whether you should manage it yourself.
Yeah, so typically, when I'm setting up a 401k plan for, really whether it's a nonprofit or anything, is you're going to have a kind of what I call a core fund lineup. It's a list of funds, maybe index funds and some actively managed funds, or it might be all index funds and all actively managed funds. So you kind of have those options there. And then what your plan should have is a what's called a QDIA, or qualified default investment alternative, and that's for those people that enroll but fell asleep and didn't actually choose an investment. And so you'll automatically be enrolled into a target date fund or a model portfolio based on your age, which is, to be very direct, a terrible way to invest money. And the reason why I say that is, if you're 55 years old today and you were an aggressive investor when you were 25, the likelihood that you're still an aggressive investor at 55 is probably pretty high. But if you're defaulted into one of those, into the kind of the default fund, you're not taking on as much risk as you might want to.
Yeah.
So I guess how do you pick it? I would say that core fund lineup is primarily for the do-it-yourselfers. And if you don't trust yourself to do it yourself, then I would seek guidance through either the 401k record keeper themselves. If you're logging on to Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, Solaris, Schwab, whatever it may be, usually they'll have a participant hotline that you can get some guidance on. but it's not going, that's what it is though. It's guidance. It's not advice. So you might have to seek outside counsel through either a 401k advisor or just a regular wealth management advisor will be able to help you out as well, kind of piece together that portfolio. Then you got to make sure you review that at least once a year in that points. But there's also, depending on how your plan is set up, you can usually allow another, an advisor to actually manage that with discretion for you to in line with your investment objective. So it is a little bit wonky in 401k world when it comes to, managing the assets, and that's what I think confuses a lot of people. So kind of sitting from the start, most people will maybe review that once a year. And which is fine because it is long-term money, and a 401k investment should be very boring. So you can't day trade mutual funds because literally it takes 3 days to sell them and they get back in. So kind of picking that long-term capital allocation, I think, is crucial. And then reviewing it, and I work in this part of the industry, so I may make it a bigger deal than it actually is, from the most part. But, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I do recall from the show we did together before, when you talk about these big companies managing it, a lot of their systems are basically popping you into these age buckets as well. Is that correct? So, it's not as... Yeah, it sounds complex, but I'll tell you, I do have some plans with target date funds, but I'm really not a fan of them because they're very, very boilerplate and very, very cookie cutter, and they don't really adjust to the market 20 years ago or 5 or 10 years ago is not the same market that it was today. So you get away with blindly throwing money, 50% into the S&P 500, throw some core bond. But if you didn't own the top 7 stocks in your 401k plan and only the top 7 stocks, you're down over the last couple of years unless you got a great active manager. So, kind of knowing what you're invested in, our industry makes it extremely complicated to know exactly what you're invested in. Most people have to click a link, goes to a 197-page prospectus, and then you read through it, and by the way, that prospectus includes 12 other funds that have nothing to do with the fund that you're looking at. So I think seeking some guidance or maybe doing some good Google searching on what you're invested in would be advantageous. If it's worth your time. If you think it's not, then I would maybe outsource that to an advisor to help you out, because we have the tools and capabilities to kind of comb through that stuff a lot quicker. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's, preferable to sit down and be able to ask your advisor questions about what you're looking at and, understand it a little better. Okay, that's great. So... And kind of on that, I also do think that the 401k world, sorry to cut you off there for a second, but I do think 401k world, by defaulting people based on their age, just doesn't make a lot of, that's not a way to pick investments, because I look at myself kind of like a doctor, as egotistical as that might seem, where, if you come to me with a problem, a doctor doesn't go diagnose you based on your pain tolerance. So if you're 25, but you say you're a conservative investor, I'm going to go, well, this is what I'm going to recommend. It's probably going to be 100% equity stocks and carry a lot of risk, because that person has 40 years for that market to compound and go up and down. And I know that they're going to be better off in the future if they take on risk now. So kind of training that person to be able to take on enough risk, because otherwise, if it's just sitting in cash, that's part of kind of one of the core reasons why you need to contribute to a 401k is, number one, dignified retirement. Social Security won't be enough. Number two is inflation, which has been in the headlines lately. But it's been an issue for most people for, the last 20 years. Like in Minnesota alone, inflation hasn't been 2%. It actually hovers around 8 to 9% a year for the last 20 years, which is why you can't just have all your money sitting in cash, money markets, CDs or treasuries, because that hasn't historically kept up with inflation. So the cost of milk has gone up 47% since 2000. So inflation does happen. So essentially boiling it, if I could boil that bullet point down to one soundbite, it'd be you literally cannot afford not to invest your money, and you need to have some exposure to stocks, even if you're retired. Yeah, right. Right. There's a tremendous amount to know post-retirement about your 401k. And I think most of it would surprise a lot of people, so it is good to find out the nuances of that so that you're ready. And basically, you're not getting out of taxes. You're either deferring them, you can pay them now or pay them later, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Roth you can do now, which does make sense. You will have less money out of your paycheck though, because they're going to pull money. So like kind of the way your employer works is they issue the checks, FICA taxes get pulled out of it, and then it ends up in your personal bank account, which then you can turn around and spend on goods and services. For like a pre-tax 401k, it goes straight from your business. No taxes are taken out into your 401k account. Where Roth, kind of the same process as you receive your paycheck, they're going to pull taxes out of it and then end up into your 401k. So you're going to have a little bit less take-home pay by going Roth. It's usually not enough to make you not do it, but it's just something that people I think should know, because it can be a surprise for some of those like lower wage earners.
Yeah, thank you. Sadly, this is going fast, but I wanted you to address those business owners who either have a 401k plan or are thinking about implementing a 401k plan.
Yeah, so for business, now is a good time for those who have been kind of thinking about it, or are looking at the biggest question or especially early on business owners, the difference between a simple IRA or should I do a 401k, and they look at the cost of 401k and they're like, never, I'm not paying $5,000 a year to start a plan. Well, now the U.S. government has realized that there's a massive lack of retirement savings, and so now they're trying to encourage business owners to foot the bill. So they're providing tax credits, which are different than tax deductions. So tax deduction just lowers your taxable income, which then helps calculate out your tax liability. A tax credit is a direct offset of your tax bill. So it's usually more of an advantage. But anyways, the tax credits cover 100% of the cost to you as a business owner, up to $5,000, which usually covers 100% of the costs. And then you also will get another tax credit if you add automatic enrollment to your plan. And then if you provide a match or an employer contribution, you can actually get $1,000 per employee in tax credits. So to give you kind of an example, like I just did a tax credit estimation for a business owner that reached out to me. And their all-in costs, with their provider that they chose and everything, was about $5,000 annually for as long as the plan. The administrative tax credit covered 100% of their costs for the first 3 years.
Wow.
The automatic enrollment added another $500 to that, so now we're at $5,500 in tax credits. And then they had 39 employees, so they got another $39,000 in tax credits.
Wow.
For a total of $44,500 in tax credits for something that initially cost you about $5,000. And so that can be a huge advantage. And those those kind of phase out incrementally over 5 years. And so huge advantage. There's no reason to set up a single plan. There's no reason to set up a SEP or go with those low cost options. You can have a kind of a Ritz-Carlton style plan, just like 3M Cargill and Medtronic have, and provide that to your employees, which is a huge benefit in my opinion.
How many employees do you need? Is there an amount, or doesn't matter?
You have to have less than 100 employees for the administrative. That's the bigger tax credit of $5,000. Less than 100 employees in the preceding year. And then it does get not to get too granular, but it does matter, do your employees make less than $100,000 in order to get that actual contribution tax credit, which is where all the real tax credits are made, because you can get that per employee.
Wow. Okay, I think that's amazing. That's definitely something for business owners to look into, and they can also participate as the owners in the plan, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and you can actually kind of slant your plan to actually make more of those contributions actually go to the owners as well, to offset your tax liability by savings for retirement. And you can actually stack, if you want to do profit sharing contributions on top of your regular employer match, you can actually get up to about $66,000 in deferment into your retirement. By the way, that $66,000 also reduces your taxable income. And then it gets even better. Wait, there's more. You can stack a cash balance plan on top of that, and you can defer another $265,000 into that on top of the profit sharing, on top of your employer match, and on top of your employee contributions, which can be a huge advantage. For one, I set one up for a doctor earlier this year, and they were 55 years old. They were able to stuff away $315,000 tax deferred into their using this kind of combination of plans.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that was super interesting. So, if you're a business owner and you just heard any of that, I would recommend that you get in touch with Kurt and talk about it some more, because that sounds really quite amazing, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean for that particular person, age 55, stuffing away $315,000 or roughly, I mean that was $105,000 in tax savings for them.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. This has all been fascinating. There's a million more questions that I could ask, but you also work with pension plans. I don't know if there's anything you want to just some kind of summary comment about that. If there's anything that there aren't even that many pension plans out there anymore, as far as I can tell. But what would you say about them?
I would say if you have a consistent income flow, it doesn't work for everybody, but if you're like a healthcare business, a law practice, dentist's office, or something with like very consistent cash flow, I think it makes sense to look into setting up a pension for yourself, because you got to have them open for about 3 years. And there is required funding for it. For example, if your your agreed upon amount is, I want to put in $300,000 this year because I had a great year, but next year I don't think it's going to be great, you're not a good candidate for it, because you're going to have to put in that same amount that following year plus market return. So most pension plan actuaries will calculate, hey, we need a 4.5% market or 4% market return on the assets from year to year. So you put in 100 year one, and then on year two, we need to have at least 104,000. By the way, if that market drops and we're at, say, 95,000, then you're going to have to put in 100 plus the 5 to make up the difference. And that can be an advantage to some people who want more tax deductions, because you can actually get more tax deductions. But how you manage that pension money does matter. Mm-hmm. And so it's typically more conservative. But if it's just you and your wife and you run a real estate practice and you put this together, I got some clients that are like, I want this aggressive. I want this invested in this. I don't care about the funding requirements, because we have money coming in the door and it's just a bigger tax deduction. And I want this to be a really big asset for me and my family in that respect. So there's a kind of a different ways that you can do it. And then you're not 3M or Cargill, where you have all these employees that you have to pay out every time they retire. This is more of a small business type pension plan, which does make sense. And I like to kind of discuss it with it, and if I have someone who is interested in that because of today, shiny object syndrome, they can get the tax deductions today, then I go, okay, I'm going to try to convince you not to do it, because I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, so then it doesn't turn into a liability in the future. So there is, there are some great tools you can do, but it can be a hindrance on business if they are set up and we're not on the same expectations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. Well, you are a wealth of knowledge. I'm pretty sure I said that the last time, but I love just the breadth of your knowledge base. It's really impressive, and I know this is a big passion for you, and that's part of why you're able to, take advantage of learning all this stuff, and so I really appreciate this. I think it's super helpful. Can you tell people again how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so ivoryhill.com is where we're at. You can contact me through that. Otherwise, my primary marketing platform would be Twitter. So it's just my first name, middle initial S, and then last name, right there on Twitter. And then through that, you can find my newsletter as well that I send out on weekly. That's primarily investment focused. I do have a kind of a separate 401k type newsletter that's more of a quarterly type basis for information, but the phone works as well. You can pick up the phone and give me a call, 952-828-5336, and I'm happy to talk shop with you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. There was a lot in this conversation as well. And I really feel like this is an area where most of us don't know enough, and we get surprised, either now or later. And so I don't like surprises like that. I like to have enough information so that I can plan. So thank you. And for people listening, I really do hope you'll get in touch with Kurt and check out his newsletter. And for business owners, I think you just opened up a really amazing, opportunity for people. And thank you for sharing that. So,
yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Yeah, thanks for asking to come back. That was it was a pleasure to have you back. So thank you, and audience, thank you for being here. We love when you show up and listen or watch the Money and You show. You can find us on YouTube, the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. You can find us on all the podcast platforms and Roku and some other places. And if you like the show, please give us a rating, a good one if you can, and comment and share with your friends. That helps get the show out there and allows us to bring great guests like Kurt back and provide you with more information. We are trying to both help you with your relationship with money so that you can engage with money more, and really just to demystify all the aspects of the things that you're probably already doing. You're probably already saving somehow, so why not learn more about how you're doing that? So thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next week.